Welcome to the Cognitive Crucible, produced by the Information Professionals Association. Our website is information-professionals.org, where you can find links and information about today's conversation and get access to members-only content. Join John Bicknell and explore all aspects of our generational challenge, cognitive security.
My guest today on the Cognitive Crucible is Mr. Harrison Schramm, who is a principal research scientist at Group W and works at the intersection of data, models, and policy. After a 20-year career in the U.S. Navy, where he served as both a helicopter pilot and operations analyst, he entered practice as a professional statistician. He's been active in this community, where he has served as vice president of the Military Operations Research Society, or MORS, and is the recipient of the Clayton Thomas Prize for contributions to the profession. Of note, he chaired the inaugural Informs Conference on Security in February of last year, and he enjoys professional accreditation from Informs, the American Statistical Association, and the Royal Statistical Society. He is also president of the Analytics Society of Informs. Harrison Schramm, welcome to the Cognitive Crucible.
Thank you, John. Really happy to join you here today.
To kick things off, could you give our audience just a little bit more background about your career, especially post-military? And I'd also love to get your hot take on the way you are seeing the information and national security challenges that we're facing today.
Thank you. So yeah, it's been quite a journey. When I was halfway through my time in the Navy, I had the opportunity to go to graduate school at Naval Postgraduate School. And I really found that the people that I was around in operations research were my people, in the sense that both as a matter of the problems they were tackling, as well as just the personality types I found myself surrounded by, I found that to be my second home. I think it's very important for the active duty members of the audience that are listening. As you move towards transition, you're going to leave your tribe behind. My tribe was naval aviation. And it turns out I don't get to wear green pajamas and fly an airplane in my civilian life. So I was very fortunate that as I was going through transition, I left my tribe of Navy Air and I joined the tribe of MORS and Informs. And so that helped my transition considerably. I really like to find things out, and I really like to work on hard problems. I think that as far as the profession is writ large, there's a lot of emphasis on credentials and boot camps and data science accreditations, et cetera, et cetera. But for me, I think that the two most important attributes of a successful professional in this space are natural curiosity and refusal to take no for an answer. And by refusal to take no for an answer, I mean they're morally outraged by the notion that something would be too hard. So I know people who have advanced degrees who do not have those traits. And I know people who don't have technical degrees, but have those traits. And so for me, it's the personality trait is really the most important piece to being a successful professional in this space.
You mentioned data science in there, and so a lot of people are obviously talking about looking into this career field. What advice do you have for folks, mid-career professionals looking to change into that field or to expand their credibility in the data science field?
So it's interesting because there's a lot of talk both in and outside of government about data science, but when you push someone for a rigorous definition, it can be elusive. One definition at the non-rigorous end of the spectrum is someone who lives on the West Coast who has 1,000 LinkedIn followers, which I think qualifies both of us. But a more regular definition of a data scientist, and the one that I've been using, is someone who lives on the intersection of computer science and statistics. So someone who, like myself, is trained, has extensive formal training as a statistician, but has an interest in coding and knows more than just basics of getting the computer to function. Alternately, you can get into this by being a computer scientist who knows more than intro stats. Regardless of what the pathway you get into the profession, I think that success is determined by having specific questions and types of questions you want to answer. And if you're driven to solve, and I'm going to use the term solve loosely because many of the problems I work on do not have solutions in the sense of X equals 5. But you can gain insights on them. So if you are looking for the type of problem to gain insights on, picking the right problems is really important. And then as you follow the problem, your tool set and your education will follow.
Yeah, totally agree with all that. I've seen recently some of your publicly facing press pieces and articles. Notably, you were on a panel discussion sponsored by CSBA with the Honorable Mr. Robert Work. And I will have a link to this in the show notes, of course, and I recommend our audience check out this panel discussion. It's excellent. But you seem to be putting a lot of brain power against the intersection of humanity and AI. And so since this is the cognitive crucible after all, what are your current thoughts on this topic?
So I think it's very important. Artificial intelligence is one type of endeavor, but the opposite or the counterpart, if you will, of artificial intelligence is natural intelligence. Natural intelligence is the type of intelligence that you're using when you choose a specific roadway to get to work in the morning, not because Waze or Google Maps told you, but you know that there's construction, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So one of the things that I think is going to be a challenge in the era that we are entering with the AI revolution, and particularly AI applications to warfare, is the right partnering of natural and artificial intelligence. I think that so that's one direction. Another direction that's really important is the issue of explainability. For the audience members who may not have built neural network models or worked with them, you end up with this thing that my engineering professors used to refer to as spaghetti wires. You end up with this very complex interconnections, and it's incredibly difficult to go back in and reverse engineer how the inputs related to the outputs. Now, neural nets are modeling highly nonlinear complex systems, so that's not a surprise. However, one thing that I think is very important to maintain sight on in this era is that for real problems, particularly those that impact the lives of human beings, the explanation is as, if not more important than the actual answer. So I have seen, and I am fearful of situations where the analyst comes in and delivers an answer, but cannot explain the rationale for it in language that the decision maker finds acceptable. And that's a problem, because we need to know, particularly when we're talking about things that impact justice, we need to understand why, not just what.
Right. And this is becoming a vivid problem. Neural nets are being deployed across the commercial and government sectors, and being able to, as you said, explain explain the conveyor belt, the production activity of going from raw data through an AI and getting outputs, and being able to explain that to decision makers is critical for engendering trust in AI. And then on top of that, there are AIs that are interacting with one another and evolving themselves in ways that are currently impossible to understand. So all of this is, very much live research, and a very much of a vivid requirement for national security. Would you say that that's fair?
So at its core, statistics is the science of justice, in the sense that if you come to someone with a question or a concern about justice and you have data, then you're looking for statistical work. And AIs are neither good nor bad. in the same way that elemental iron is neither good nor bad. You can make a sword or you can make a plowshare out of elemental iron. My concern is that without proper supervision and without demanding explanation from our AIs that we are creating, we are inadvertently at risk of developing systems that will be able to deliver injustice at speed and scale. And one final point on that, why the human element is so important. I wrote a piece a little over a year ago with Jeff Klein, talking about how humans have to remain the masters of artificial intelligence. And in this, we asked the provocative question: when we're looking at the career fields and the people that are doing the work, and how we are going to educate them, we need to be mindful of the fundamental question, which is, are we educating AI's masters or are we training its servants? And if you find that provocative, good.
Right. Well, it certainly is. And we're just getting started on being able to answer those types of questions, hopefully. So I'd like to transition just a little bit, if I may, and start talking about supply chains. Supply chains, a big topic of discussion during COVID, but I'd like to get your thoughts from both a military and civil point of view when it comes to supply chains, please.
Well, thank you, and thank you for this. I'm actually using this interview as one of several sessions to prep myself for a public lecture I'm giving on the 16th of August in a series hosted at Naval Postgraduate School on AI in the future, and I'm going to be talking about supply chains at that event. And so the story of supply chains, both military and civil, is that there's two fundamental forces that are in tension. These are efficiency, and efficiency is usually measured by dollars. And the thing that's in tension with that is resilience. Resilience and efficiency are not diametrically opposed. However, it is very difficult to achieve both simultaneously. When you think about the military logistics, and I'm going to use the US Navy because that's what I'm most familiar with. And as a helicopter pilot in the US Navy, I was at the very end of the logistics chain right before things got delivered. So for the last 20 or 25 years, the Navy has been focused on efficiency over resilience. And that's, the people who made those decisions and the people who put those systems in place were doing what they were told to do at the time, because we had some assumptions that the Navy was going to have the sanctuary of the seas. Likewise, on the civilian side, we've seen supply chains grow longer, supply chains focused on minimizing the overall cost. When you're minimizing the overall cost, and when the production and foreign labor costs are part of the equation, then offshoring things and having long shipping lines is a reasonable thing to do. Now, moving into summer of 2021, there's confluence of events that are causing us to reconsider this. For example, as we are returning to an era of great power competition, I believe that's the buzzword that's currently being used. One of the things that you immediately realize in return to great power competition is that the Navy will no longer have, as the late Wayne Hughes liked to refer to it, the sanctuary of the sea, meaning that if previously you could just say, well, if things get bad for our supply ships, we'll just pull them back to some distance offshore and everything will be fine. We're no longer believing that that's a valid assumption. Likewise, on the civilian side, COVID and the disruption to the global supply chain that came with COVID is having governments and civilian industries reconsider how long they think their long supply chain should be. So now the net result of this is we're seeing a use case where efficiency is taking a second place stance to resilience. So thinking about resilience in our supply chains is in general a good thing.
Yeah, lots of potential follow-on questions there. Yeah, so you were mentioning 20 years ago or so, we were aligning more on efficiency, or historically, we've been aligning more on improvements in efficiency rather than improvements in resilience. And 20, 30 years ago, post-Cold War, we were living in a world where our technological superiority was, we had the monopoly on that. But now a lot of the US led, I'm not solely US, but a lot of the US led technology has percolated throughout the world to such a point where people of very modest means in any country in the world can own a computer and then use that technology to attack us. Whereas 30 years ago, that just wasn't the case. No one else had the technology we had. So consequently, our supply chain infrastructure was like Swiss cheese from a resiliency and from a hacking standpoint. What's your comment on all that?
So there's a lot to unpack there. When I'm talking about the sanctuary of the seas, I'm talking about from physical threats. I think it's not so much the proliferation of technology, but the delta between the adversaries in the war on terror in Iraq and Afghanistan. Whereas when you're looking at a more capable adversary, such as China or Russia, as we're looking at the confluence of AI and supply systems, one thing that we need to start to realize is, in a military context, and this is where the two fields diverge. In a military context, some things are fundamental. And one of the things that's fundamental is you are going to have to send the supplies several days before you expect them to arrive, if the transshipment mode is going to be land or sea. And so the supply chain decision makers, be they human or human in cooperation with AI, are going to be making risk decisions implicitly or explicitly. And one of the things that has come up in a number of exercises that I've been involved in, and other things that I've just sort of been on the periphery of, is if you're looking at a really hard adversary and your supply chain problem, AI enabled, comes up with the solution that everything is going to get supplied right on time, then you're probably not looking at a problem that's hard enough. Because in a tough scenario with a competent and capable adversary, it is likely that the solution is going to be that there are some units that are not going to be supplied. And so we could find ourselves in the future where we have a regime where supply decisions are actually are leading operational effects. That is a completely different way of thinking about this problem than the services have traditionally thought about the problem.
Right. Well, you're describing what sounds like a pretty hard problem, which includes human on-the-loop trade-offs with AI decision-making. Does that sound about right?
Yes, and I think one of the things we haven't, and I've said, to backtrack just briefly, I have been of the opinion for the last several years that our fundamental problems when we think about AI and society writ large, to include military, these are manpower and policy problems. They are not technology problems. With a reasonable laptop, with a credit card that you can buy machine cycles on AWS or some other platform, and with the ability to download R and TensorFlow and other packages, which all, by the way, happen to be free. You just need the tenacity and the will to make it work. You can build AI at home at speed and scale. So one of the things that I don't think we've thought through sufficiently is how much moral responsibility is shared between a human commander on the loop and an AI making recommendations? My sense is, and I think most people would agree, that that the human should retain all of the responsibility. However, in the future, with a very fast-paced information stream and a commander sitting on the loop who is acknowledging and approving decisions made by the AI, it's not clear to me how that's actually going to shake out. And I think some people who specialize in philosophy and law need to think about that. So to make that example concrete, if I'm sitting in the command cell and I'm looking at different places and one of the ships decided that ship is just not going to get resupplied in favor of optimally resupplying other ships, and I hit OK, how does that work out morally and ethically compared to if I had made that plan out of whole cloth? It's unclear to me what the right answer is, but it's something I'm worried about.
Yeah, right. Maybe just to play a little devil's advocate here, we're both retired military officers. One of the hallmarks of the military is giving a lot of responsibility to officers from day one. A second lieutenant, an ensign, has a lot of responsibility that may not translate into for their colleagues, their counterparts on the corporate side of the house. But you ladder that up to the commander, who's a commanding officer of a ship, or lieutenant colonel, battalion commander, who's in charge of 1,100 souls. They've got a lot of decision-making authority, which includes those excruciating trade-offs. And I'm talking historically here, throughout history. How can you contrast historical difficult decision-making, which includes ethical challenges, to what you were just talking about?
Honestly, I'm part of the joy of a podcast is I can nominate problems that I haven't solved yet. I think that really needs to be thought through. However, one of the things, not to just completely punt, if you're not able to dominate, but you still want to win, then one of the dimensions is risk. And so how our risk calculus changes when our risk calculus is made by natural intelligence vice artificial intelligence is, again, something that ethicists and lawyers really need to think through.
A lot of this gets rooted in philosophy, and when you drill down deep enough into philosophical roots, you find out that the foundations are pretty slippery, and there's strong differences of opinion as well. So it'll be interesting to see how AI helps answer some of those challenges. I'd like to get some more of your thoughts on manpower and people-related challenges. We've, interleaved through this whole discussion has been a number of mentions about people-related challenges. What are some of the possible solution paths there that you see?
So I think that I don't know if we're out of the pandemic or not. I think we're in the middle of the end, if I could be hopeful. But coming out of 2020 and early 2021, it has been my observation that just about everyone that I know who does the type of work that we do, operations research, statistics, applied mathematics, we're all as employed as we want to be. In fact, some of us are more employed than we want to be. And that's because in the United States, and I'm echoing comments that were made in that public panel with Mr. Work, both by him and myself, in the United States, the number of jobs and the demand for this skill set is rapidly outstripping supply. And not only is it outstripping our supply, it's outstripping the feasible ways that we have to increase the supply. One of Mr. Work's signature recommendations in the National Security Commission on AI report, which I've written about in the press, is the creation of a digital service academy, in the sense of a central repository for the nation's talent to go and be educated and then have some sort of government service obligation afterwards. In the same, not mirroring the West Point and Annapolis service academies, but sort of in the same general direction. I personally think that's very good. We have pockets in this country where it is very difficult to break into the types of professions that we've been talking about. But I believe at my core that the talent is spread all over the place. And so we can't afford to not siphon up all the talent that we possibly can. That's both our internal talent of people that are born and raised in this country, but it's also external talent, as in people who come to this country to get educated or come to this country as early professionals to work. Like you, John, I didn't come across very many, foreign citizens when I was in the military. But now that I've been out, you come across folks that are working in industry. And I think that's something that we have to be mindful of is when young people come to the United States, we are taking a loan of talent from the country that's sending them. And that's a loan that we don't necessarily have to repay. I hate to sound that draconian, but it's up to us whether we cash that, whether we allow them to cash that check or not. I know several people who have come to this country working in the field of AI, who have had to defend themselves with immigration, and sort of the thing that's in tension here is you have to realize that when you have talented people that are working in the United States and working for companies in the civil sector, then that talent at some level frees up other talent to work in the defense sector. Meaning that if the foreign talent that was working at companies, and I'm not going to name any of them, but all the companies you can think of, if they were all sent home, then market forces would pull people away from the defense sector to do that type of work. And the folks who are doing this type of work in the United States, if we send them back to their home countries, they're not just going to sit on their couch and cry all day. They're going to find a way to ply their trade. So we can either allow them to ply their trade in the United States, further the American way of life and further our economy, or we can send them home and they can further somebody else's economy.
Western democracies in general remain very attractive destinations for immigrants. And not just the United States, but I think all Western democracies should be leveraging that attractiveness while we still have it. I assume that the torch is going to remain lit on the American experiment and the West in general, and we should be leveraging that beacon to attract top talent and retain that top talent. My experience with immigrants is that they tend to be very grateful, very patriotic, very enthusiastic about being American. Frankly, more than some Americans do, who have grown up in this culture and perhaps take it for granted a little bit, which is a shame. But all of this is part of the project, I think, to help counter the information challenges that are being directed at the West and America in particular. Well, so before we sign off, Harrison, I'd love to get your suggestions for a book or other online resource that our audience may not know about, which touches on some of these themes.
So since this is the cognitive crucible and it's and it tends to be defense related, I'm going to make two recommendations. The first one is a new book edited by Sam Tangretti and George Goloski called AI at War. It's for sale at the Naval Institute Press. It's not terribly expensive. I think it's $30 hardcover. Full disclosure, I have a chapter in this book, as do a number of other professionals who are sort of in my same swim lane. I signed all my royalties back over to the Naval Institute. So, this isn't shameless self-promotion. The other book that I would recommend, if you're interested in thinking about the field of statistics, but you don't have an education in it, is called The Cartoon Guide to Statistics. You can get it for about $15. It is literally the cartoon guide to statistics. It does have a little bit of calculus in it, but I found that to be a great resource when I was teaching. If I had students that were having difficulties with understanding the concept of hypothesis test, having it presented in cartoon form can really diffuse a lot of your concerns. So those are my two book suggestions.
All right, fantastic. As always, we'll have links to these and other resources mentioned during the discussion in the show notes. And with that, Harrison Schramm, thank you so much for being on the Cognitive Crucible.
John, thank you so much. And I've been so happy to watch your success and all the great work that you've been doing over the past couple of years.
The Cognitive Crucible is the only podcast dedicated to increasing interdisciplinary collaboration between information operations practitioners, scholars, and policymakers. To find out more about the Information Professionals Association, visit us at information-professionals.org. Please support our podcast by giving us a 5-star rating and leaving a review.